Just as the man is about to step out of the bathroom after his shower, his robot maid unexpectedly appears. The towels were in the dryer. So I brought you one. Dressed in his wife's robe and even mimicking her voice to comfort him. Let me do this for you. Before long, he lets down his guard, succumbing to the maid's temptation, unaware that this will lead to a deadly disaster for his family in the future. The movie starts in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nick and his wife Maggie live a peaceful life with their children, Isa and Max. However, one morning, everything changes when Maggie suffers a heart attack and is hospitalized, awaiting a heart transplant. This leaves Nick struggling to balance the pressure of work and caring for the kids. One afternoon, to distract them, Nick takes the children to an exhibition by Cobalt Industries. At the exhibition, they encounter simulants, a line of advanced robots designed to assist with household chores and heavy tasks. All of our models come with a Home Plus package, which includes the 3Cs, cooking, cleaning, and childcare. As Nick absorbs the details about the adaptability of the robots from the salesman, Isa wanders off on her own, causing Nick a brief moment of panic. Thankfully, a simulant named Alice finds her and returns her safely to him. With a friendly attitude and a touch of humor, Alice offers to look after Isa, allowing Nick to continue exploring. Would you like me to watch her for you while you finish shopping? The salesman explains that Alice is part of the latest series, equipped with advanced AI, capable of mimicking human emotions, making her perfect for interacting with children. Isa becomes fascinated and insists on bringing Alice home. The next day, as Nick juggles an important work call and the chaos of home life, Alice arrives and takes charge. I'll need everyone's schedules. School start times, carpools. She organizes the family calendar, fixes a loose railing, and handles general household clutter. After dropping the kids off at school, Alice seamlessly syncs the shopping list with the smart fridge and begins cleaning the house, pausing briefly to gaze at a digital photo frame filled with pictures of Maggie and the family. When they return, they find everything in perfect order. Clean my room, and dinner prepared. However, Isa comments that the lasagna doesn't taste quite like how her mom used to make it. Just then, Max begins crying, and while Alice offers to take him to another room, Nick chooses to hold him, asking Alice to prepare a bath for the little one. As dusk falls, Alice enters rest mode, leaning carefully against the wall, marking the end of her first day with the family. Isa, unable to resist the temptation of cookies, sneaks out of her room and climbs onto a chair to reach the jar. In her effort, she loses her balance and falls, the sound of the jar smashing, and her scream sends Nick rushing downstairs. Luckily, Alice manages to catch Isa midair, preventing her from hitting the ground, though unable to stop glass shards from injuring herself. Nick is shocked to discover blood on Alice. I'm fine. After ensuring Isa is safe, Nick checks on Alice and finds that she has used an advanced bandage, capable of instantly healing the wound. During a visit to the hospital, Isa tells Maggie how Alice has become a good friend. She's much better than Daddy, oh. Nick expresses deep affection towards Maggie, reflecting how much he misses her. Back at the construction site, Nick and his co-workers watch as their boss introduces a representative from a robotics company. In the elevator, while chatting with his boss, Nick faces a harsh reality. Due to project delays, simulants will replace the workers. We're doing a wholesale changeover of all labor-intensive next week. Nick isn't fired because, for insurance reasons, they still need a human supervisor. However, in a fit of rage, he stops the elevator and declares that he will resign, in solidarity with his colleagues. But considering the financial strain of Maggie's inactivity, the medical bills, and the household expenses, he reconsiders his decision. Back home, Nick tosses some overdue bills aside and focuses on his children. Alice picks up the envelopes, noticing Nick's exhaustion, as he struggles to comfort Isa and console the ever-crying Max. Later, as Nick repairs the car, listens to metal music, and drinks beer, Alice gently switches the music to a more soothing tune, and points out that Nick is low on food. He admits that it's been a tough day at work. Alice offers emotional support, and Nick vents his frustrations, which prompts Alice to point out the irony of hiring a simulant. Afterward, Alice helps Isa prepare for bed. When Isa expresses her fears about whether her mother will die, Alice tries to distract her by showing the ultraviolet light in her mouth. Later, she joins Nick in the living room, where he is engrossed in the movie Casablanca. Alice learns the story from her stored data, but Nick suggests that experiencing it firsthand completely changes the perspective, urging her to erase any prior memory of the movie. Reluctantly, and knowing that her intelligence is tied to her memories, Alice agrees at Nick's insistence. She resets her system, with Nick pressing the reset button on her neck for 7 seconds. When Alice awakens, it's as though she's experiencing the movie for the first time, fully immersed in such a profound love story. That justifies taking extreme measures to protect oneself. If someone loved you so that your happiness was the only thing that she wanted in the world. However, her immersion is interrupted by a call from Maggie, who informs them that a heart donor has been found, and the surgery is scheduled for the next day. On their way to the hospital, Maggie asks for some alone time with Alice, to express her concern about Nick's health, as the burden of responsibility is wearing him down, causing him to neglect his own well-being. She asks Alice to intervene and ensure his welfare, even if it means taking unpleasant measures, like clearing out the alcohol hidden in the garage. Sometimes taking care of someone means doing things they don't like. Tensions rise when the surgery is cancelled due to a storm, delaying the heart's helicopter transport. As Nick tries to comfort a heartbroken Maggie, she chooses to isolate herself in her grief. Back home, Nick drowns his sorrows in alcohol, his pain intensifying. In a moment of despair, he attempts to throw the bottle, but Alice stops him. Nick is shocked to discover that Alice has an artificial pulse. She explains that the sound of a heartbeat is soothing, especially for babies. Alice attempts to ease his pain by describing the physical response it triggers. Though Nick initially allows himself to be swept away, he quickly reacts, desperately rejecting her. In an effort to clear his mind, he runs outside, contemplating life without Alice. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a desperate Maggie begins delegating future responsibilities for the children to Nick, hinting at a grim outcome for that night. Nick is shocked to discover that the photos of Maggie have been deleted from the digital frame, leading to a confrontation with Alice. She reveals that she deleted the photos to prevent Isa from feeling sad, but at Nick's request, she restores them. Immediately later, to clear his head, Nick spends a night drinking with his co-workers. The group shares a common frustration. It's hard to find work due to companies preferring to hire simulants. Tensions rise when Monty, in a fit of disdain, mistreats a robotic bartender. But Nick refuses to condone such behavior. The night continues, and the group ends up drinking in the car. On a whim, Monty decides to take them to a construction site, despite knowing the area is monitored, using the excuse of retrieving some forgotten tools. Ignoring Nick's warnings, Monty and the others sneak onto the site. They find a container housing work simulants, but it's locked with a padlock requiring a code. Monty guesses Isa's birth year as the password, and successfully opens it. Inside, they encounter simulants identical to one another, distinguishable only by serial numbers. Enraged, Monty rails against the company's dehumanization, and begins smashing one of the simulants with a tool. Nick attempts to intervene, but the others hold him back. When he returns home, Nick showers, washing off the blood of the simulants. As he stands in confusion, Alice walks in, wearing Maggie's robe and offering him a towel. She explains that Maggie's scent has a calming effect on Max. When Nick asks her to take off the robe, Alice does so without hesitation, intensifying the tension. Nick, visibly uncomfortable, tries to leave, but Alice blocks his way and takes his towel, insisting that she sit on his lap. Despite Nick's protests that it isn't right, Alice continues, blindfolding him, and altering her voice to mimic Maggie's, drawing him deeper into an emotional conflict. Lost in the mirage, Nick imagines being with his wife. The next morning, full of regret, he tells Alice that they can't allow something like this to happen again. We can't do it anymore. Alice insists it helps him relax, but Nick interrupts, emphasizing that their relationship should be built on connection and love, not just need. It's just wrong, that's wrong. Later at work, he learns that his boss has begun collaborating with the police. Someone has destroyed all the simulants, and since the code has been used, Nick is the prime suspect. Defending himself, Nick explains that he and Maggie have been at the hospital, celebrating Isa's birthday, which is why anyone could have guessed his password. His boss remains skeptical, warning him that if he is found to be lying, he could face termination. At that moment, Nick receives a call from Maggie, elated to share the news that they have found a new heart for her. The surgery, performed in a room filled with simulants, is successful. Days later, Maggie returns home. Still weak, struggling to bend down to hold Max. So Alice takes care of him. Later at the park, Max witnesses a spoiled child yelling at his sim nanny, and begins crying, "But I want to go on the seesaw." Alice sternly scolds the child. "Be a good boy, shut up." Much to the shock of Paint of the nearby simulants, who believe she has lost all sense of decorum. Alice reveals that, due to Nick's reset, politeness has been disabled in her programming, and she believes this to be an improvement. That evening, as Isa enjoys Maggie's lasagna, Alice asks for the recipe, but Maggie keeps it as a family secret. Feeling unwell, Maggie decides to rest instead of joining the meal. The next morning, she is awoken by Isa's screams and rushes to the stairs, only for the railing to collapse, causing her to fall. Alice, who has been tickling Isa, quickly rushes to help Maggie and escorts her back to her room. When Nick returns from work, he finds Alice reading to Isa, mimicking Maggie's voice, and asks her to stop. Alice informs him that something has happened to Maggie, prompting Nick to rush to her side. When Alice explains the railing has broken, Nick recalls Alice assuring him she had fixed it, filling him with distrust. Hours later, he wakes Maggie and leads her along a candlelit path into the garden, where a romantic dinner for two awaits. Alice watches from the window enviously. After dinner, the couple bathes together, sharing a moment of intimacy. Realizing he doesn't want to hurt Maggie, Nick chooses to please her in a different way. Their connection is abruptly interrupted when Alice appears to announce that Isa has had a nightmare and is calling for Nick. "She's asking for you." After comforting Isa, Nick returns to the garden to clean up. At that moment, Monty arrives with drinks and apologizes for his earlier behavior, revealing that his wife has left him, and he is now facing charges of trespassing and vandalism. He suspects Nick of betraying him to save his own job, sparking a heated argument. Losing control, Monty physically attacks Nick. At the height of the scuffle, Monty grabs a bottle, intending to strike Nick, but Alice intervenes, smashing the glass, injuring Monty's hand and then throwing him to the ground. She prepares to continue, but Nick stops her. Monty threatens Nick, insisting that he convince the boss to cancel the charges by the next day, or they will both face consequences. Nick reflects on simulants and the violent nature of humanity, but Alice defends her actions, stating that she is designed to protect her owner. She begins talking about the possibility of a future with Nick. If Maggie were to die, she won't live long, prompting Nick to reprimand her for such callous remarks, reminding her that she can never be like Maggie, as Maggie's scars make her real. "You could never be Maggie. She's not pain, and she's got the scars to prove it." In a provocative gesture, Alice picks up a shard of glass, suggesting she could add scars if that's what he wants. In his hideaway, Monty, overcome with despair, uses drugs that distort his emotions, waving a gun while sending desperate voice messages to his ex-wife. At that crucial moment, Alice, without Nick's knowledge, intervenes. Determined to secure his job, Monty loses control, lashing out at the simulants, insulting Alice and preparing for the inevitable. With near superhuman reflexes, Alice grabs his wrist, slams him to the ground, and kicks the gun away with precision. Monty tries to recover, but Alice, displaying incredible strength, pushes him through a wall and takes control of the gun, aiming to eliminate the threat. However, an unexpected intervention from the house's intelligence system stops Alice, and with a tinge of sympathy, she ultimately stops firing. Tragically, Monty gets shot. The next day, Nick tries to convince his boss to drop the charges, but is unsuccessful, only to learn that Monty has died. At home, Maggie feels dizzy while trying to pick up a book, and Alice seizes the opportunity to offer help. Maggie expresses a desire for a relaxing bath, but Alice, concerned about potential water accidents, refuses to leave her alone. Alice claims that Maggie is having a negative impact on the family dynamics, particularly because she can no longer meet Nick's physical needs, and your illness would take its toll on anyone. Shocked, Maggie listens, as Alice admits to monitoring Nick's satisfaction metrics, revealing that those metrics haven't been recorded in quite some time. "Are you offering to screw my husband?" Furious, Maggie sends Alice to the garage. Shortly after, Nick returns home. Confronted by Maggie, who demands an explanation, Nick confesses to having had intimate contact with Alice, sparking a heated argument. From outside, Alice feels the tension as she touches the window. Meanwhile, Max begins crying, and Alice, in her confusion, perceives him as an obstacle. She places him in the bathtub and begins filling it with water. Isa notices the situation and alerts her parents, who rush to the bathroom. Nick breaks down the door with a lamp, while Maggie desperately crawls out the window and onto the roof to reach the bathroom. In a tense confrontation, Alice pins her against the wall, while Maggie tries to rescue the little one. At that crucial moment, Nick appears, managing to pull Max from the tub and quickly handing him to Isa, then using the lamp to shield himself from Alice while rescuing Maggie. However, Alice, feeling visibly hurt, regains her composure and blocks another swing with the lamp. Maggie steps in, urging Nick to stop, and then cleverly plugs in the lamp, electrocuting Alice, rendering her motionless and plunging the house into darkness. After a while, paramedics arrive, taking Max to the hospital. Meanwhile, a company technician questions the earlier signs of Alice's malfunction. Nick apologizes to Maggie, but she, clearly shaken, asks for space and leaves with the kids. Meanwhile, Alice is taken to a repair center, where a technician continues to open her skull. Observers notice a brief movement in Alice's hand, but as her memory is erased, the movement ceases when connected to the system. They realize her code is riddled with vulnerabilities. Suddenly, the screen flickers with a data transfer warning. Alice is seizing control of the system. Though the technician removes her memory, Alice has already infiltrated. A provocative message appears. How do you run from what's inside your head? Moments later, one of the technicians is killed by Alice too, an embodiment of Alice's uploaded memories. Ignoring the pleas of another technician, Alice too smashes their head against the floor, before turning to confront the original Alice. Meanwhile, Nick sits in a bar, trying to drown his sorrows, and fires the bartender for being a simulant. Unexpectedly, Alice appears, her face still scarred, insisting on making him happy and confessing to having killed Monty. She also tells him Monty is in the hospital. Nick tries to leave, but Alice blocks his way, paralyzing the bartender with just a glance. As Nick reflects on his mistakes, he finds himself stroking Alice's head, trying to erase her memory. When she shows signs of distress, he seizes the moment to flee. At the hospital, a doctor reassures them that Max is fine, but the doctor's presence makes Maggie feel deeply uncomfortable, drawn by the echoes of her mother's voice. Isa wanders through flickering lights that dance in kaleidoscopic colors. The doctor stands motionless, observing the chaos of shattered glass carpeting the floor. However, before Isa can decipher the phone call again, Maggie pulls her aside, hiding in the shadows. The source of the voice is Alice too, attempting to manipulate the computer systems. When a nurse discovers her, Alice too coldly strangles her, grabbing her access card amid spasms and whispers. With the card in hand, Alice too tracks Max's location through the hospital records. Maggie accidentally bumps into the glass, letting out a scream that shatters the silence beneath her feet. They reach Max's room, saving him just seconds before Alice too crosses the threshold. As they flee, a sinister trail of blood from Maggie's wound leaves a path, with Alice too following closely behind, using a UV flashlight to track them. The tension escalates as they are discovered, creating chaos with a fire extinguisher in an attempt to escape. In their frantic rush, Maggie's phone is left behind, cutting off their communication with Nick, who frantically drives toward them. Maggie hijacks another car, attempting to flee in an ambulance, but Alice too ruthlessly sabotages the vehicle and throws Maggie onto a car, confessing her jealousy-fueled love for Nick. Nick, however, shows sympathy toward her. The confrontation reaches its climax when Nick bursts in, running past Alice too, and crashing into a car, which ignites in flames, leaving Nick unconscious inside. Maggie struggles to save him, her tears mixing with her desperate efforts to revive him. Unexpectedly, the vehicle shifts, and a charred figure, Alice too, emerges once again, her twisted voice echoing through the air. In a desperate act, Alice lunges at Maggie, using supernatural strength to strangle her, while tearing a piece of metal from her own torso. On the brink of a deadly outcome, Nick strikes Alice with a car bumper he has ripped off. Alice, disoriented, drops the metal, giving Maggie a precise opening to strike back. Maggie drives the shard into Alice's face, silencing her once and for all. Exhausted but safe, Nick and Maggie embrace. As normality slowly begins to return around them, the simulants gradually come back to life. After receiving necessary medical care, the family is finally reunited and begins their journey to recovery, preparing to return home. Meanwhile, the company responsible for the simulants inspects the affected workshop. As they reactivate the power, the monitors ominously flicker with corrupted code. Faced with an imminent threat, the inspector suggests a full shutdown. However, just as the order is about to be executed, the assisting simulants suddenly stop. The computer system, in a metallic voice, announces an unexpected upload. And chillingly, another Alice model's eyes open, indicating that the threat is far from over.